All right, so I only have a little while, actually. I have about an hour to, oh boy, to talk about this presentation that we had today. It was really super amazing. Actually, I'll do a little bit of research while I am talking because it was just so amazing and there was so much about it that I want to be able to elaborate on. And I just really think that this is going to be a valuable talk for everybody because it was for me for sure. So it's about this organization called ZAKA, which is broken down into a number of different factions. It's all rescue and recovery. They have a large part of the organization is about recovering bodies from accidents, basically all kinds of unnatural deaths, and they really do an incredible job of honoring the dead and doing what they can to save those who can be saved, and for those who can't, they really show as much respect as they can. This is like a huge Jewish value is respecting the the dead body. It said that for all the time, actually, I kept thinking it was only 24 hours, but for the time until the body is buried, a person's soul, like their spirit, hovers above the body until it's taken to resting. And this is a really neat thing because there's this idea about that, then the soul or the spirit of the person can be watching and knows what's happening, and literally you are laying them to rest when they finally go to the grave. So I guess I'm going to touch on a couple of points that he really drove home and talk about a couple of this guy's experiences that were really amazing. I mean, some of the stories he told were things that have happened around the world in the last 10 years, and the things that are like these crazy huge media stories, you never hear about the people behind the scenes, and he has been there for the earthquake in Japan, I guess it was an earthquake in Haiti, or Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, and then his first experience was in 9/11, where he realized that this is what he has to do. He got trapped inside of a building because he was a paramedic at the time, or had some paramedic training. He was only 18, went in the building and got trapped and realized that this is what he wanted to work to change in the world was, not to change, but to help in the world was to keep helping, and to keep getting people to better situations, even after they're out of these tragedies and whatever goes on. For those who survive, I think it's really important therapy and coping and stuff. So it's neat because Israel also has the follow-up of really specialized therapy, and art therapy, which is what I'm going into, is really up and coming here as well, which is interesting and something that I've been thinking about. So they have thousands of volunteers. I'm going to read off of their website here. Founded in 1989 in Israel, ZAKA was originally formed to respond to terror attacks and deal with the retrieval, identification, and burial of the deceased. Since then, ZAKA has grown to a world-renowned humanitarian organization, providing search and rescue, autopsy prevention, because that's something that is Judaism really stresses not defacing the body because it belongs to the universe, it belongs to Hashem, they say it belongs to God, and that it's something that if it doesn't need to be done, and even though this guy could go to court and it would, serve justice and all different kinds of things, really the priority is on keeping the body intact and showing respect. So it's really controversial. It is, and I actually don't know how I feel about it. This is one of those situations where I do not stand terribly opinionated because it's rough. It's not a simply cut and dried situation. It's sort of a big and weird thing to approach with a hard head on either end. But I think that it is really amazing and beautiful idea that regardless, after a person dies, that they'll have eventually, when Moshiach comes, you know, God willing, which I think is an amazing and beautiful concept. That all people who have been buried whole and intact will rise with their body as they were, and be able to walk with Mashiach to I guess it's to the Kotel, to the third temple when it's rebuilt. This is all like a whole other lesson in Judaism. But these are some of the beliefs of, after what they call the end days. And so it's not as important that in the moment justice is served for that person, because eternally they'll be able to stand and walk. And what is bigger and better than that? If you don't have the spiritual grounding to back up that claim, then no, you're not gonna go with an idea like that. You're gonna say no, there needs to be an autopsy. We're here and now. We need to deal with it, which I think is an important point too. So, anyways, that's a tangent. So yes, autopsy prevention for that reason. Then also medical response and mortuary services with over 2,800 volunteers, which I think has risen recently, based in over 15 countries. And that's only where they're based. They will go to different countries other than those 15, I believe, for all of these services. ZAKA can provide rapid response and deployment in short notice, providing their expertise and equipment when needed. The guy who worked with us who came to talk with us, works with a lot of different people. He does training, so he's really at like the head honcho of a bunch of different projects and recovery and searches. So let's see. I wanted to find there was a page that talks about the different groups that are within ZAKA. There's so there's a mortuary unit, a canine unit, a dive team. It was interesting. He was telling us about the divers, that the first thing they do is go as deep down as they can, because when somebody drowns, I think some may not know, that a body will first, a person who has not yet died will, or who isn't going to die, hopefully, will sink to the bottom, and after their lungs have filled up with water, their body becomes buoyant to the point that they float again. So they have to first go to the bottom, and then they come back to the top of the surface and to look for bodies that are floating around in the vicinity. So the dive team does search and rescue, which is probably one of the largest and most elaborate of their teams. For after it says earthquakes, hurricanes, typhoons, storms and tornadoes, floods, dam failures, technological accidents, terrorist activities, and hazardous material releases. So that's kind of a big deal. Let me turn on this light. Close the door. Too many people yelling and doing things for me to concentrate and hear myself. So yeah, this is really amazing. Like, I was just really continuously blown away by everything that he said, how many people they have on these teams, the photos they showed. It was a little bit graphic and pretty morbid, the whole presentation, but it was very real. And it was like, what higher mitzvah, what greater deed can you do than devote your life and day and night? This guy sleeps, he said, an hour or two, maybe a half hour some nights, especially when he's working nonstop like that. So what greater thing is there that you could do? And these people, it's not just like, oh, anybody can work for them, anybody can volunteer. They have to go through really rigorous training and testing to be sure that they are emotionally and physically equipped to do this work, because it's a big deal. You're like dragging people out of buildings and, finding body parts that he was talking about. This is was unbelievable. I guess it was basically that the whole train station had ended up underwater during, I think it was during Katrina, and that they were finding pieces of people's bodies in the shape of diamonds from being pushed through the gates that are, they're like the metal gates that are formed in diamonds, and that from the water pressure, the bodies had been pushed through them, and they have to go collect the parts of these bodies, put them back together, and then try to bury them whole, which is quite a task, I can only imagine. So, all right, of course, they have a medical team, a medical unit that goes out, and it says they have to require maintaining of constant certification in accordance with worldwide medical emergency standards. So that means not just where they are, but also their country. They have a hazmat team, autopsy prevention, like I talked about before, and a missing persons unit, which was really interesting, that they crawl on their knees to find footprints and to take molds of them, and then send back reports of, it's this type of shoe, we need to start following it. They have dog sniffing, and then maybe they'll have rovers and stuff that they take out, and they've been able to find people this way, foot tracks that lead to drag marks that lead to scent, that lead to a person that they eventually are able to save, or may find in the unfortunate event that they've been murdered. There was also a minorities unit, which was really interesting because they're able to, in its minority representation within their volunteers or workers, that they take and they're able to have these people who represent a minority that has their own customs for taking care of either bodies or rescue or whatever it is, that they have their own way of doing things, and they want to be able to honor that. So this is not just Jewish, it's not just Israeli, it's as far-ranging as you can imagine, but most of the people that do work for them are Jewish, I think, for the most part, and Israeli, because it's based here. I am just so amazed and so proud that something like this came out of Israel, and that this is something that they do. So, all right, I guess now I'll talk about some of the stories that he told us. So a couple of years ago, I don't know if it was that I learned about it a few years ago, it only really happened a few years ago. I think it was about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, that there was a terrorist attack on the Chabad in Mumbai, which had actually been, they were told to go there by the Lubavitch Rebbe. I guess it was maybe 20 years ago, maybe shorter than that. And he said that there should be a Lubavitch family there. It would be great to have representation in India. There are Jews there, not as many as obviously other countries, but there is a presence. So it was felt that there needs to be outreach. And in any case, this family had been there in an apartment in the city, and so basically what happened was there ended up being 6 people held hostage by these terrorists. It turned out that the terrorists had been watching them for 3 weeks, maybe shorter than that. I can't remember exactly, but for days at least they had been watching these people to find out what they do. And this is pretty standard for a kidnapping situation, that somebody will watch, and then they make their move when the situation is vulnerable. And so they figured, they realized that these guys get together for Mincha prayer in a particular room at 3:15 every day, and finally decided to go in and make their kill, or whatever they were going to do, at 3:15 one Wednesday afternoon. And it was within hours that the rescue unit was called, and they went in and got there by Thursday, early Thursday. And so this guy, I can't remember his name, maybe it is Michael. He owns a bar locally, so that's a cool thing. It's just, I'm not sure if that was actually his name. I got his business card, but I took it upstairs to my room already. But So he had the charge of calling the phone of this rabbi, whose name he happened to recognize. He was like, "Oh, I know this guy, or I know somebody with his name." There are a lot of Jews with similar names, and same names, because it was like last name Rosenblum or something like that. And so he calls the phone, and the terrorist picks up, and he hears the rabbi's wife in the background, or the woman who lived there, say a final prayer. She said, "Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad," and that's "Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, God who's one," basically. And that's like a staple Jewish prayer. And after that, he heard 3 gunshots fired, and no more after that. I think that or no more voices after that, at least. I think the terrorists probably hung up, and then they decided to take action. I think that they didn't finally go into the house because of the situation and everything that was going on until Friday, and by that point, the entire house had been completely shot up. Everybody inside was dead with the exception of one terrorist, which I think that there was more than one terrorist. There were at least 3, I believe. And so, an amazing part of his story, actually, which it's unfortunate that people died, but it's also amazing that that particular Wednesday there was a community gathering of some sort. I think he said, maybe, I don't think it could have been a bar mitzvah, because bar mitzvah happens on Shabbos, I believe, only. But maybe a wedding or something. And so the people who had been at this community gathering, this event, decided to stay for Mincha that day instead of leaving and coming back to the Chabad house, in which case there would have been a lot more people, under siege by these terrorists. So that's just like one more point that, what were the chances that the terrorists would choose a day, things like this that, in little miracles that people are like, Hashem really has an eye out and a good intention for the Jewish people. Even when bad things happen, sometimes he tries to make them less bad. So I think that's a beautiful thing. So what happened then? They went into the house. I think it was when they finally had enough staff on site, so that they went into the house, and they found all the bodies, and one of them was this rabbi that he had studied with, and he found his body, and he didn't know for a minute. He picked it up and he looked, and he was like so mortified. He had to leave and go outside and regroup, because what do you do when you find somebody who's dead? It's a little bit different when you're recovering, not anonymous, but unbeknownst to you, or unknown to you, bodies of people that you're not familiar with. So it was this rabbi that he had actually studied with personally, and that had to be like really rattling. Like I would be totally earth shattered if I was in that situation. I really don't know how this guy does his job, but he's a total mensch for it. It's an incredible thing. So after that, they recovered the bodies. The photos were like totally horrifying. There was blood everywhere, and it was like a war zone. It was like you couldn't believe that there was only one side shooting. There were bullet holes, like it looked like wallpaper. It was insane. Even just the feeling to need to shoot that much is just really insane, and just like the commonality of it among people it's just. I become really curious about how people become in that mindset, that their human nature is overridden so violently by their inclination to do evil. It's really sad too to know that so many souls are taken over by bad intentions. And I mean, this all sounds really abstract, and I guess that's like maybe not a good way to put it, but just the thought that so many people live their lives believing that killing people is a way of peace. It's totally backwards and contradictory, but to some, and I try to not empathize, but to understand somehow that to some that makes sense. So, but I don't know, I seek to change that mentality somehow. I think eventually, obviously it's ideal, but anyhow, we're 20 minutes deep, so I'm gonna get this wrapping up. There are 2 more stories that I want to share. So anyhow, at the end of that, the biggest miracle of this story was that ultimately they saw footsteps or some kind of prints that were in some of the bloodstains that were on the floor in this house, and it turned out to be that they belonged to a baby the baby that belonged to the Chabad rabbi and his wife, who both were murdered. But they found out that later, maybe a few weeks even, he said later, he was asking, how did this happen? How was it that the baby found its way outside, that it survived? And it was the responsibility of, I think, a housekeeper or the caretaker of the baby. Had been on the staircase or in a storage room hiding between the 1st and 2nd floor, and heard what was going on, and ran out, and has like no real recollection, like just stretched her arms out and somehow ended up outside. Just did it because, this is one of those things where like you forget completely. Maybe it's so traumatic, but to me there's something like spiritual about it, that like you find it somehow inside yourself. And like when people are channeling and they say that, they have these connections to the divine and stuff, I think that there's something to be said for the human capacity. If it's not just scientifically, you can break it down somehow, psychologically or whatever. I think that there's another element to it that we sometimes like to leave out because we like to be pessimistic. But I think it was just incredible that she did this, and she then had no recollection of it. She was like, I don't even know how I did it, but I rescued this baby, and we ended up outside, afterwards. So that was really what the take home of that was, that the baby survived, and the caretaker too, who I don't even know how she got in or out of the house, if she was already there when terrorists came or what the deal was. But girls are coming back from being out. Oh, yeah. Hello. They're all so sweet. The girls here are so nice, and like they all want to like get to know you, and they'll be like, "Hey, I haven't talked to you yet. Let's hang out later." And like it's so wonderful and awesome. Like it's really great. Like I usually have problems making friends with girls, but like I'm so delighted by these people. I'm like really happy about it. So anyhow, so also one of the 2 of the other stories that happened was that they work in Haiti. They went to work in Haiti after the earthquake there, and as they were floating through the city on boats and getting shot at, or maybe that was in New Orleans, but either way, in situations like this, people become really desperate for rescue and food and whatever resources you might have, because they're like trapped in buildings and on top of buildings, and many don't survive and are really desperate. So he went and did this on his own. Oh, okay, this is the story. This is the story in Haiti. Now I remember the story in New Orleans, which is amazing too. But so the story in Haiti was that they were floating along, and they found, or maybe they were driving at this point because it was an earthquake, not a flood. But they found the bodies of 3 women who had been pregnant, all dead, and he was possessed for some reason to perform C-section on one of them. And I'm not sure if he did on all 3 of them. It sounded like he had, because later he talked about that what ended up happening was the baby survived, of this, at least the first one that he mentioned, and then afterwards he found out that there were 4 more babies, or 3 more babies that were named Jewish, and one of them was Israela, which is, like Israel, named for the country that sent the people, the first people that came to Haiti to do rescue and any kind of response at all. It came from Israel. And I mean, I think there's something to be said for that, for this devotion, and it's not just to Jewish people, to saving lives. And I was just so impressed and proud of this guy. So he saved the life of this baby who, by the way, this mother, usually, a person can live without oxygen up to like 6-7 minutes maybe if you really practice. But the mother had been dead at least 20 minutes based on, his analysis. And the baby survived. That's not normal. So there was that, and then his story in New Orleans is really cool. This is where they were floating and getting shot at, and it was like totally stupid of him to be out there trying to do anything without really a big enough team, but he did, and I guess he had gone around asking people for help, and he got a call maybe, or he called, and this person said, "Oh, I want to help you. I want to come out," and what he was actually doing at that point was it was Torah scroll and body recovery. So he was separately, but he was going with a team to take things from a couple of synagogues in New Orleans and to save people. And so when he was going to take the Torah scrolls, before he met this guy who had called him, or he called and said, "Oh yeah, I want to do this. I love surfing. I'm all about the water. I'll come with you. No biggie. Sounds good." So the guy met him up, and when he meets this guy, he finds that he has a giant swastika tattoo on his arm. Like, who is this guy, and what is he doing coming on like a Jewish rescue team? Whatever, I'll take it, as long as he doesn't like try anything, whatever. They didn't have weapons or anything dangerous, so he was safe. But so they get together and they go out on this boat and they go to rescue Torahs, and they, in the midst of saving people and the 3 Torahs that they collected, because, they had, I don't want to say bigger fish to fry because rescuing a Torah is a big deal, but they had lives to save too. So they did that, and this guy, when he first came into contact with the Torah, he held it and he did not let go. He wouldn't let go the entire time that they were doing this rescue. He just kept holding on to it. And then they got on the flight to go back up to New York, where they were taking the Torahs to a sofer, which is somebody who writes Torah scroll and repairs. And they took it, and on the plane, he was holding it the whole time. He wouldn't let go, and everybody else puts it down or does whatever, and he wouldn't do it. He would just hold on to it, and is like attached to it. And the guy is like, who was giving us the presentation, who was with him, was like, "What is your problem, man? Like, what's with you? You're a neo-Nazi, and you're obsessed with this Torah. You won't let it go like it's a child." And the guy was like, "I don't know what's with me. Like, I just can't let go of it. I feel the need to hold on." So he did, and afterwards, when they got to when they get on the airplane, he like asked them for a child's seatbelt and like attached it to his own so that he could like constantly be in contact with this Torah scroll. And when they got up to New York, he still didn't want to give it to the sofer. He didn't want to let go of it, and he was like, "This is too weird. This is like totally crazy and strange." And he eventually went home and was in contact with his grandmother, or his mother, I guess. And I can't remember exactly how this part of the story goes, but the guy came to him, or called him, the neo-Nazi guy called, I'm going to call him Michael because I'm pretty sure that was his name, and said, I need to talk to you. Is it okay if I come over?" And Michael's like, "Yeah, whatever, just fine, come." It's the middle of the night, and they had like just gotten back from this mission, and it was like, why is he calling me in the middle of the night? But he did, and he let him come at like 4:30 in the morning. And he comes, and he was bursting into tears and like crying, and more red alerts, rocket attack in Moatza Ezorit Shar HaNegev. So this is like further south. There were a few more earlier today too. I was on the phone with a friend when a couple other rockets. It's hard to tell when the rockets that hit or the rockets that are intercepted, but it's pretty constant at this point. So the guy is like crying and like telling him that his grandmother had called him and said, I can't keep this from you anymore. The I don't know if she told him or if it was all in this note that he gave to Michael to bring to, or they gave to the neo-Nazi son to bring to, or no, his name was Justin, that's what it was, to Justin to bring to Michael. And so the note, ultimately, the story was that he ended up being a Jew, that his grandmother was a Holocaust survivor who was so fed up and angry. And this happened to many Jews after the Holocaust. They turned their back on Judaism and said, Hashem is a lie. How can this be that he allows so many people to be raped, pillaged, and murdered by Germans and the rest of Europe, frankly, to look on and watch this happen? And how could such a travesty happen that, there's a God? So, screw that. I'm gonna raise my family neo-Nazis. And so that's what she did. And she said, I paid for that tattoo. How could you go and rescue Torah scrolls? This is insane. And, ended up realizing that he had this soul connection, that he had this understanding somewhere in his neshama, that he knew that he had this ultimate connection to the Torah. And that was just so powerful and amazing. Like, I sometimes question, like, how do people have, like, these, divine connections or whatever they think it is to, experience in life and whatever. How is it that they can claim to have this, like, separate soul or something different? But these kind of stories, and this guy's not making stuff up. He's not, like, really super from or anything. He doesn't have a beard. He's telling the story of an experience that he had, and I don't see why he would make it up. Like, it just doesn't make sense. I don't see why people would believe in these things and why they would make things up. They're not trying to indoctrinate anybody. That's not what this is about, and I don't feel pressured. I don't feel like these stories are to lure me into anything. I really think that they're just, they're stories of hope and of love. So, I'm going to get to the point. What happened was that the grandmother wrote this note about that when she had been in the Holocaust, she never again wanted to see Judaism or associate with it. So she wrote this note saying all of this, that my son my daughter and her son Justin, they're all Jews, and that's what this is all about. So he actually eventually became religious and moved to an area of Brooklyn that is religious. I can't remember what it was called, but and has 2 children and a wife that are all Jewish, and so that could come of such a tragedy as something that happened in New Orleans is, like a glimmer of hope among, a really gigantic cave of darkness. So that was one. He also went to Mexico, Japan for earthquakes, and then went to France when this school shooting happened that I think a lot of people heard about it. I'm pretty sure it was that a terrorist came in and murdered 3 children at least, I think it was. And the child that... So one of the children, one of the mothers, said that in light of this tragedy, it amazes me so much that my child had such a special soul that came into the world and in only 3 years was able to fulfill her purpose. Because that's what's believed, that when a person dies, that's when God meant for them to die. Everybody is born and dies on time. And as much as people don't want to hear it, and as emotional and as connected as we feel to the people that come into our lives, and as sacred and important as every life is, there is the belief, and there is a belief, and I don't know how I feel about it. Again, I'm not just taking all of this and, taking it like for people's words. I'm taking it and letting it soak in and see how I feel about it. But there is the belief that people's lifetimes are as they're meant to be, and I think, again, that's comforting, that if that is so, and that a soul comes back into the world, that it's okay. Death is not the end of your soul's journey. It's not the end of anything. It's the end of right now in this physical body, but really there's much more that underlies and is behind it, and that's the more special and bigger message. So his experience in France was of that parent having that perspective, and I think that's amazing. So let's see. There was also some controversy about the UN not recognizing them as an international organization, and then later not revoking that statement, but I guess changing that opinion to say that in fact this is a internationally renowned organization. Their symbols should be known, and it simply can't be ignored anymore because it's incredible what they do, and it's international. It's not just this little like Israeli thing. It's a big deal that they take care of a lot of people. And there was one more story, I guess. Two, I guess. I'll just tell one of them though. The most recently, the boys who were kidnapped and murdered in the West Bank, hitchhiking. This guy was on that story. He ended up going to the site and recovering their bodies, which were buried. One of them buried alive, two burned and then buried. And their bodies were intact. He said they were not decomposed like you would expect. And he says that this is another one of these interesting things, that the soul stays with the body for up to 24 hours. I think I may have mentioned this earlier. For up to 24, no, not up to 24 hours until I did mention this. So it's about this thing that the soul stays with the body until it's buried. And he experienced that just 2 weeks ago when he went and found these bodies, and was like the rest of us, really mortified and sad, and further disappointed by these Jewish kids who they're religious kids who went and killed a Palestinian kid like last week. So it's not an eye for an eye here. That's not how we see things. That's not how it should be, and that's not a Jewish way. That's not any kind of way. I don't think that there is or should be any kind of practice of a kill for a kill. That's not right, and that we all know that two wrongs don't make a right, and I was going to say two rights don't make a left, but in any case, that's just so incredible to know that there's a person who has seen this much. He had such a powerful voice too. He really was. He kept us awake, that's for sure. It's all white walls in this room, like the one behind me, and it's easy to start like snoozing when. Even if something is really fascinating, all of our lessons are really interesting and inspiring, but it can get like a little mundane sitting, and so they have us get up and stretch and whatever, but he would raise his voice and he would get really emotional, and he really kept our interest, and he probably didn't have to do it quite as much as he did because it was really, it's a passionate subject, and we all were really interested, but so that's the bulk of what we just experienced and were exposed to. So I had to share about it. I hope you all are enjoying these installations. If you think that I should do like shorter videos, or less, or that are longer, whatever works for people. I just want everyone to see them and to enjoy the information I'm putting out here. I think it's really important for the world at large to have some kind of information other than what's going on in the media. Everyone's like flipping out about these rocket attacks when, like, yes, Gaza is throwing, lots of junk. I call it junk because it's just like disorganized metal. They're not like bombs, like giant explosive that are like flying in the window, at some like target. It's just like, it's kind of like a slingshot, what they have pretty much. And the Iron Dome does intercept the majority of that. And what falls tends to be in out in open areas in the desert, or along highways, which can be dangerous. That's recent. Yesterday, something fell near a highway. At any rate, I do need to get ready to go to dinner. I am going with my rabbi from Pittsburgh to what's the place called? He told me earlier. Gedaliahu Alone Street, which I guess, what's the name of the actual place? It's the Institute. Oh my gosh, Shalom Hartman Institute. And it's only a 10-minute walk from here, which is great because I was going to go to Tel Aviv, but I'm not going to travel alone. And I really wanted to find something to do. Though we also do have a wedding tonight that we were all invited to come and dance at, which I might do after this dinner. But anyhow, I'm going to do that with Rabbi Jamie, who I've known since I came to America 20 years ago. So it's really special that I finally get to see him and meet up in Jerusalem. Really cool thing right there. I love making connections in Jerusalem. I run into everybody here. I've seen so many friends and acquaintances that I didn't even know were in the city, usually in the old city, by the Kotel, which is really cool. It's an interesting thing that souls decide to meet in certain places at certain times. So that is all for now. I will talk to you all soon.